Carney's career in public service has spanned more than 20 years, including serving as Lieutenant Governor of Delaware, Secretary of Finance for Delaware, and Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Tom Carper. As a public servant, John has been able to make a real difference in our state and local communities. As Lieutenant Governor, he implemented the Models of Excellence in Education program, which enabled successful schools to effectively share best practices with other schools around the state, raising test scores and producing better students. As the son of two educators and a father himself, John Carney is no stranger to the issues facing education today. That's why, as our congressman, he supports federal standards that empower local schools to make decisions based on what's best for the children of their community. He understands that the key to long-term success as a nation is a world-class public education, and that in order to prepare our students to compete in the global economy, we need to enhance the emphasis on math, science, and technology in our schools. He understands that in order to provide our students with the best possible education, we need to give our schools the resources to provide teachers with the tools they need to be successful in raising the achievement levels of all students. Please welcome to the stage our Congressman, John Carney.
It's not very often that my timing is so good. Or that when I walk into a room I have 30 seconds before I have to get up to speak, but it is really a distinct privilege and a pleasure for me to be here this morning with all of you. Thank you for that opportunity. This is the start of a very busy day, a busy and looks like rainy day. After I leave you this morning, I'm on the road back to Wilmington for the St. Patrick's Day Parade, which has not been canceled, and then back on the road again later tonight for a dinner down in Georgetown. So I have a rainy, dreary, long day in Delaware beats the very best day in Washington, D.C. And I've noticed just a little bit extra excitement and enthusiasm around this gathering this year, and I've been following a lot of that in the paper with the City of Wilmington schools issues and testing and other issues. And I've heard from many of you last night at the cocktail reception. As your only member of Congress, I spend a lot of time on the train from Wilmington to Washington every day. And I have a lot of time actually during those trips to think about what's happening here in Delaware. In case you haven't noticed, things haven't exactly been going smoothly in Washington either. Despite all that, I remain really, really optimistic that we can get things done. On that train, though, gives me a chance, as I said, to observe what's happening in Delaware without being directly involved in the discussions and the debates, as I have been for many years as a state official, going back to my time as working for Governor Carper. And I also have a lot of time to reflect on the challenges that we face as a country. And I think about those challenges in some ways in the context of how I grew up in Claymont. I don't know if we have any Claymontsters here. I see a couple of... It was a wonderful place to grow up. I grew up there with 8 brothers and sisters and 2 parents who were educators. My mom, while we were growing up, ran a daycare in the house that would have been illegal, actually, if it was really a daycare with that many kids. But it was a wonderful, but all the, if I think about the parents of my friends in the neighborhood, most of them worked on good middle-class paying jobs in the industrial complex along the Delaware River, from Phoenix Steel to General Chemical to Sun Oil to Sunship, all the way up there. If you look at those facilities today, not as many of those jobs, a lot of them have been automated, not as many of those, supports for those middle-income families. And if you look across the state, you see the same kind of thing. We lost thousands of jobs at General Motors, outside Wilmington, thousands of jobs at Chrysler, at Avon outside of Newark. And those jobs are fewer and fewer. And so as I'm on that train, I think about what my responsibility is to do through legislation in my work in Congress to try to revive and revitalize the middle class and industries that provide middle class incomes. I spend a lot of time and energy thinking about that and what we should do. I happen to believe that we need to make things here in America, to manufacture things here and to export them overseas. But what's very clear to me, and I know it's clear to everybody in this room, is that today's jobs require more education. Whether you're working in the factory, one of those factories, or where you're doing the highest tech, most involved scientific, job that might be out there. And unlike when I was a kid, less and less it's the case that you can find a good job that supports a middle-class family with just a high school diploma. It used to be, you get a high school diploma, you get a job in a factory, support your family, and everything was great. And so our kids are not just competing against kids in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Maryland, but they're competing against kids around the world. And so are all we educators. The same way the U.S. is competing with countries across the world to get businesses to locate here. And I think about that a lot in what I do. And one of probably the most important thing is an educated, skilled workforce. So companies can set up operations here that require more technical skills than ever before. Think about the situation today, at a time of pretty high unemployment, over 5%, a little less than 6% here in Delaware. There are 500,000 jobs in the tech sector that go unfilled in the U.S. every year. And we have big debates about how to bring people in under H-1B visas here to do those jobs, people coming from overseas. And by 2020, employers worldwide could face a shortage of millions of workers with the skills needed to perform the jobs that are available. Probably the most important competition for preeminence in the world economy is going to be just this: how countries prepare the next generation of workers. We know that a child's success depends on a whole lot of factors, starting from the time that they're in the womb. But we know that the most important factor, the key, is making sure that every child has the very best teacher and educators, and that teacher has the tools that he or she needs to be effective. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in a room full of teachers and educators, or that both of my parents were teachers. I'm saying that because that's the fact. Consider this: several years ago, I went down to North Carolina. Former Governor Jim Hunt, who was a 4-time governor of North Carolina, educational leader. He put on this forum for lieutenant governors across the country. And one of the presenters was a guy by the name of Dr. William Sanders. This is over 10 years ago, and I remember it as clearly today as I did 10 years ago. He was a research fellow down at UNC, in the UNC system. And he'd run this very sophisticated regression analysis using data from 8 states, including Delaware, tens of thousands of students, and thousands of schools. He was trying to determine the most important factor, determining factor in a regression analysis for student achievement. What affected that student's achievement the most? And his answer, overwhelmingly, was the quality of the teacher in the front of that classroom. This is not a mystery, it's not a secret, and yet too often our public policy approaches don't recognize that. You know that better than anyone, that teachers in this country are underpaid, they're overworked, and they're certainly underappreciated. I've talked to hundreds of teachers and educators over the years. You may remember when I was lieutenant governor, it was mentioned in the intro that we had this program that we called Models of Excellence. It was based on a very simple idea that really good things were happening in schools up and down our state. And then we wanted to identify those practices, hold them up, celebrate them, and try to replicate them with other schools. And it was very successful. I had the opportunity to talk to folks in schools from Millsboro to Claymont. And here's what teachers told me they needed to do their job better. More time in the classroom, more parental involvement, more professional development, a fair accountability system, and consistent, stable testing programs. Here's what we shouldn't do. Continue to bounce from one reform to the other. Change course in midstream, confusing students, upsetting parents, and making it nearly impossible for you to do your jobs every day. Look, I know there's been a lot of controversy over the priority schools process in Newcastle County. Let me just say one thing about the whole framework, not to get in the weeds. I know you're involved in it, and you should be, and you have to be. But there's a flaw, in my view, in the thinking that underscores the No Child Left Behind federal legislation that kind of created the whole situation, which is that it's based on a business model, and that competition among businesses like we have in the corporate world will create improvement and excellence in schools. And I've seen some of that, and you have too. But there's a flaw, a fallacy in it. Businesses compete and fail every day. In fact, more businesses fail than are successful. But we can't tolerate it when schools fail. We can't tolerate to close a school down just because they're not measuring up at a particular time. Instead of defunding schools and chasing parents out of those schools, we ought to give them more resources and the tools they need to be successful, in my view. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't not acknowledge the challenge, which I talked about at the outset. It is a big challenge. Or the truth, which is that we need to do better. We're not there yet, and you know that. And that there are more problems and more challenging problems in the homes and in society than there were when we were all kids. And I know there's no one who cares about this problem more than the people in this room. And that's why it's important that each of you, and you as an organization, come together, and I know you are, and be part of a very difficult conversation and a lot of hard work. Painful conversations in some ways. Whoever's not driving the train on this one runs the risk of getting run over by it, and you know that. And it's got to be the people in this room standing up and saying, this isn't working, here's what will work. We know we're in classrooms every day. And that's why I listen to the teachers and your representatives in the various local education associations and here at the state level as you come to me and talk about what we're doing in Washington, which is trying to reauthorize the ESEA. Frankly, I think both sides are pretty far apart. It was supposed to come to the floor in the House 2 weeks ago, and the votes weren't there, and so they pulled it. And for me, that's a good thing, because it's not where it needs to be. And I have really one thing when I talk to my staff about the details that are in the bill. And I say, I want flexibility for my state of Delaware. And I want solutions and answers that come from the bottom up and not from the top down. Because I think that's the way it works for us. Let me close with this. Let me close again by thanking you once again for the tremendous work that you do every day. And a reminder that the work you do is much more important than the work that I do. I can guarantee you that. Particularly when you think about the future of our state and our country. The stakes are very high. You know that. I know that. We all know that. And we gotta step up to the plate with our best game. But I want to remind you of something, and I think it's really important. And I think I'm in a position where I have a better understanding than certainly I've ever had, and I think more than you ever have. We have something special in this state. It's been criticized a lot lately. It's referred to as the Delaware way. People, the Delaware, they blah, 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 blah. But what is it at heart for me? It is about, at the end of the day, we roll up our sleeves, we work together. It doesn't mean we don't have strong opinions and fight for those strong opinions. But we recognize at the end of the day that we need to move forward together. I see my colleagues in other states, and I'll tell you what, it does not happen in other states. Part of the reason that we're able to do it here is because we all know one another. Right? That's a good and a bad thing. The good part is that we know we're going to see you in church or in the grocery store or at the ball field next week. So I better not be so nasty to you when we're negotiating and debating this particular policy issue. We shouldn't forget that. It's special to me because I see the opposite in Washington just about every day, where people are worried too much about their own political future and not the future of our country. They're worried about their own philosophical point of view and not how to get kids where we need them to be. We can do it differently here in our state, and you can lead the way. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to serve as your low member of Congress. God bless you and have a great day.
Off to the parade.
Hello. Is it on? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Is there a mute button on?
Hello.
There you go.
See, this is what happens whenever you're the junior elected officer and you have to use the kids' tape. I just want to point that out. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to the fiscal year 2016 and 2017 proposed budget presentation. It is really wonderful to see so many new faces. And as always, it's great to see those strong troopers that have been here so many times before. My name is Don Spohr, and I am your treasurer. I'm here to serve you, and I hope that the budget that we have prepared and present to you today will be pleasing to you. Before we get started, I want to thank and acknowledge the Finance Committee for all of their effort that went into this proposal. Please hold your applause until the end. Frederica Jenner, Karen Krause, Mike Hoffman, who just walked John out, Carolyn Heckenstaller, Josette Freaks, John Dean, Elena Brown, Scott Cole, Deb Stevens,